2023. My name is Peter Groves-Williams, and I'm a technical specialist at SNOMED International. I will be moderating today's session. All questions will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation. Online attendees, please use the Q&A button to type your questions to the presenter. On-site attendees, please use the microphone provided in the room. I'm now pleased to introduce Dion McMurtrie from CSIRO, who will be presenting Tooling Support for Authoring Medicines Terminologies in SNOMED CT. Dion, please go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. I'm Dion McMurtrie from CSIRO, and I left this slide in from our normal sort of corporate pack, I guess to explain to some people who might not quite know who we are, that we're Australia's national science agency. So we're, 5,500 people or so, spanning all sorts of research, and industrial application of research is really the main aim of CSIRO. Where the people that you know around the SNOMED conferences are usually from the Australian eHealth Research Centre, and we're part of the Health and Biosecurity Division of CSIRO. So that's sort of how we all fit in. Anyway, so today's topic. This is just a very brief overview of the journey I'm hopefully going to take you on, about what the Australian medicines terminology is, why that needs some sort of special tooling above and beyond normal SNOMED tooling, the existing tooling that we have and the new tooling that we're building, and why we're doing that, and then some of our challenges and timelines, just to give you a feel for what we're doing. So AMT is our Australian National Medicines Terminology. It's used in a variety of ways in production for prescribe, dispense, real-time prescription monitoring, a number of use cases. So as you can imagine, it's important for it to have the coverage that it needs to have of all of the products that are being prescribed and need to be prescribed and dispensed, and that's timely, and that the content obviously needs to be accurate and safe. So those are really the two paramount parts of our developing AMT. We do get data feeds from our pharmaceutical benefits scheme, which really just prioritizes the content that we need to get in each month, because as you can imagine, the pharmaceutical benefits scheme is our national medication subsidy, and they're by far and away the most prescribed medications, and anything that's on that subsidy usually gets prescribed. So we really need to cover that each month. We also have a feed from our regulator, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, and we really need to try and cover as much of that content as we can. So it's released monthly. We've got 5 authors who are pharmacists by background, but have been authoring terminology for a long time, so they're kind of a dual skill. There are relatively complex editorial rules. As you can imagine, simple products are simple. It gets complicated really quickly in meds. And so authoring requires creating a connected set of concepts which each have potentially relatively complex modeling, and coordinating all of those together. And that's pretty difficult to do as a human, going and authoring each one of those things with the generic SNOMED tool. The other thing I would say about AMT is it's quite structured. I mean, most medicines terminologies are quite structured and regular. So the existing tool that we have is called Lingo. We built it 10 years ago, probably slightly over 10 years ago now. It has a very high level of automation support particularly for meds authoring. That's particularly for the authoring, but also the QA processes as well. And a lot of that automation is really to enable the amount of throughput that we get through with the authors that we have, and the safety level that's required, essentially. We do get API-based feeds from our regulators and our regulator and our benefits scheme management. And essentially, the authoring is done from a form which is medicines product-centric. So it's not modeling SNOMED concepts. It's collecting data about medicines products, and then that goes through a process of generating a suggested modeling for the concepts that need to be created, detecting the concepts that already exist that don't need to be created, presenting that to the user to say, hey, this is what I think you need to do to author this product. And then there's also name generation is probably the other thing for fully specified names and preferred terms. There's quite a complex set of rules for making sure that we're naming things in a consistent way, in an expected way for medicines. And there's code in there to do that. Product-centric view. So you can go and look at any particular product and then have it pull out a kind of a view of, and I'll show some examples later of all of the concepts that are coordinated together for that particular product. And that's also very useful for reviewing when someone's reviewing the work of another author having created a concept or created a product to determine what it was that they did and whether that was right. There are also a heap of bulk manipulation features in there to be able to cascade changes through the content. So for example, if there's changes to substance naming was a classic one that happened, or editorial rule changes, they can be cascaded across the content. And it was all built on top of Lingo. Lingo was really a SNOMED, or it still is our SNOMED extension authoring tool with this built on top of it. It's also integrated into Jira for our issue tracking, which is also kind of part of an issue. So we're in the process of actually migrating to the managed service. So I guess to explain where we are and why we're doing that, Lingo essentially has suffered from many, many years of basically no investment at all. So it's aged quite prematurely. There's also the changes with its integration directly to Jira. And the changes to Atlassian's support for Jira Server. We need to do something. And that sort of precipitated the timing of needing to do something. So we either need to reinvest or change. So we've decided to change to take up SNOMED International's managed service. It offers excellent value. I don't know if the people who are familiar with it, but it also provides the advantages of us being on a platform that's common to other members and to the international edition, and potentially with promoting content and all of those sorts of benefits. After a functional analysis of Lingo and our existing tool and our existing process in the managed service, it's pretty similar, and particularly for our SNOMED extension, that'll work just fine. The big gap is really with medicines tooling, so hence this presentation. So what are we doing? We're producing a new thing. Its working name, I think, is Snomeo. I don't even know whether that's even approved yet or not. So it's a solution that's built sort of on top of or beside, I suppose, the managed service, the SNOMED managed service, designed specifically at this medicines authoring use case. It's, again, that same idea of being able to have these medicine-specific authoring features based on that same idea of having a form that pharmacists are populating, which is populating product data, and then automation around the modeling and coordination of the concepts that make up that product in the terminology. It also has this sort of inbuilt, and this is really where the Jira part went, this inbuilt ability to deal with a product backlog, a backlog of the things that aren't in AMT that have been either come from our regulator or have been requested by someone, so that can be flowed through into our content. So the managed service integration, essentially the terminology itself is stored in Snowstorm in the managed service, and it's all done via the Snowstorm's API. And then all of the authentication, authorization, all of that's, again, integrated in with the managed service. So the idea behind that is to make it quite easy for authors to be able to swap between Snomeo and the authoring platform so that it's sort of seamless to go between the two. And in fact, we've even pulled some of the features that are in the, while we're trying not to duplicate the functionality between the authoring platform and the Snomeo UI, there's certain things that we have pulled through, like the ability to trigger classification and see the classification process and run validation and those sorts of things from within the same one UI rather than having to swap. So yes, it's being built by us, CSIRO, but it's funded by the Australian Digital Health Agency, and the Australian Digital Health Agency have kind of outsourced the National Release Centre to CSIRO, so that's where the work's happening. And it's being developed as an open source tool as well. Probably the other thing I should mention that isn't on the slide. So this gives you a bit of an idea of a high level idea of how it works. So all the data comes largely from the Therapeutic Goods Administration. This pharmaceutical benefit scheme data helps us prioritize, and then we end up with this backlog inside Snomeo. Our intent in the future, we're not doing this immediately, is to be able to have our stakeholders be able to connect to that backlog, to be able to request new things, essentially. So our state health departments often need to do that. They might have some emergency use medications that they've got that they want codes for, or want things added. And those are manual sort of processes now, and we really want just machine to machine connections. The main thing being built at the moment is for these authors, both the backlog and the kind of medication-centric authoring functionality that doesn't exist in the authoring platform. Snomeo is made up of a back-end piece and a front-end piece, which the front-end piece and the back-end piece talk to each other in terms of a kind of a generic medicines model, and then the back-end piece understands that it's trying to translate the AMT model into the Snowstorm API, into the terminology. And then the release process is all down through to our National Clinical Terminology Service, which is an Onto-server instance. And our SNOMED authors will still obviously be using the authoring platform directly. That's the rough story. I won't go into this in great detail. There's essentially two drops going on at the moment, and we've divided down to an initial set of functionality, mostly around just the commonly used use cases of creating new products, and particularly using an existing product as a template, which I can show in a bit. And then there's some more content coming afterwards, but in the interest of time, I'll move on, I think, if I can. Yes. So this is that view that I mentioned before. Lingo currently has the same sort of functionality. We've tried to use the opportunity to rethink our processes, but this is definitely something that the authors really like and really want. So AMT has this 7-box model, and you can basically search for an existing product, and it'll render all of the concepts that are coordinated together to represent that concept or that product. That's pretty simple with a simple product like that. It gets pretty complicated with this sort of product. This is Nexium HP7, which is if you can imagine, it's like a box that actually contains 3 other boxes inside it, and inside that are all of the rest of the content. So that's sort of modeled out like that. And so the authors really need a view like this to be able to understand what's going on with a product like this. This is just the backlog management screen. So, I mean, probably doesn't look that different to Jira in a way, but we've moved away from Jira. And you can see these items here. A whole lot of these items are from the TGA, and they've got the ARTG IDs against them, which is our regulators identifiers. And the ability to just add things into releases, track status, assign them to people for being able to research them and decide where they should be prioritized. There's also a bunch of different labels and things we get added onto, and we can also represent where organizations have requested that particular thing, and it goes up the list. Also the schedule. So we've got our schedule might be all the way from poisons through to just simple things from a supermarket. We'll obviously have different prioritization based on those as well. This is just what one of those tickets happens to look like. Again, looks probably a lot like Jira. A link in here out to the ARTG to show where the details are for that content. But we do get some API-driven content from the Therapeutic Goods Administration as well. So then we have this concept of tasks and tickets, I suppose. So the tickets are the things from the backlog representing the products that need to be added. Tasks are managed service tasks, essentially. And you can have a relationship of multiple tickets can go into a task. So someone might author a bunch of products together because they've got something in common. So we have this idea of, my tasks, this one belonging to Kylin, because I know that's her icon. And then ultimately we end up being able to open up that task, and you can see this one has one particular ticket assigned to it. You can open up the detail of what's in that ticket and see some content there. And then this is the form that the user needs to fill in to create the actual concepts associated with that product. This is just an example of the form. Obviously, it's got constrained data entry for these particular fields to constrain down what the person is able to author. And there's a lot of cross-validation between various elements, various fields in this form to make sure that what they're choosing to do is valid. Obviously, that's done on the back end as well, but we want to guide the user down the right path in the first place. For creating a new product, you can start from scratch like that, but something that's commonly done is to actually load an existing product, because quite a lot of the time it might be, let's say, a new pack size for an existing thing. It might be a new brand for a product that already exists. So the simplest way to do that is load one of those other products, change the brand, hit the button, regenerate the new content. So it's a much faster way of working. It also goes all the way to multi-component packs. So this is Nexium HP7 again. So we've got I can't actually read that sideways. So we've got like a Moxel, Nexium, and Classid making up this product as well. So it gets quite nested, this form, and that's that's for more complex products. So it wouldn't be a 2023 talk if I didn't mention AI. So I think that the main takeaway here is that automation is really key for when you're doing something like medicines terminologies for the purposes of safety, as well as for being able to sustain the kind of throughput that you need. The automation, and particularly doing monthly releases, to be able to have a whole bunch of validation running is really important. We're going to be porting our validation across to the managed service features for the same sort of thing. So we currently already have a heap of validation that runs, as you can imagine. So we're porting that across. The AI story, I suppose, comes in particularly at name generation and even the product modeling. So the current name generator is written with a whole bunch of procedural code based on the rules that are in the editorial rules. That's proven to be useful, but it can't go all of the way because those rules are evolving and there's lots of edge cases and exceptions and things. And it's a good suggestion and usually a good starting point for the author and saves them a lot of time, but it's not right enough of the time. So they have to tweak it. And it's quite brittle if they want to change their rules. Some software developer has to go and change a bunch of stuff, and it's complex and hard. So we've looked at and experimented with using generative AI to generate the names, the fully specified names and the preferred terms based on the axioms that define the concepts, and train that off the existing ground truth we have for all of the AMT content that already exists, and AMT's quite big. I don't know, something like 50,000 products or something. So that's been quite good. The results of that are really good. And the idea is obviously that it actually learns more about the complex edge cases than we could code into the generator if we hand coded it. But it also has the advantage of us being able to do a bulk manipulation of the names if they change the editorial rules, and then just retrain the model, and then it'll now know what the new rule is. So that's worked really well. The other is going from that current very human process of going from the data that we get for products from the Therapeutic Goods Administration to determining how to fill in that product data form that we've got in our tool. And there's a bunch of choices in there about what granularity various things get recorded at, and how to fill in that form. It's quite a kind of creative process. So we're also experimenting with the generative AI to be able to have a go at pre-populating that form and suggesting how that should be populated for this particular product. It does shift the role of the author more from the processes they currently have, where they author something and they also review things that other people have done. It means that they sort of reviewing suggestions more than they have been in the past, and doing less of that initial authoring themselves. So that's still a work in progress at the moment. But the thing I would definitely add is that this does not replace the authors. It's an assistive tool to try to help make things easier for them so they can do more work, and it's taking away grunt work essentially. Challenges. So I'm challenged on time, so I'll be really quick. There's We do have really tight timelines. That's made it hard to be as independently thinking as we can be, and we're sort of conscious we've got this opportunity to change the way we do things. We don't want to just replicate what we've done before. Resourcing, a lot of the people who are doing the managed service migration, a lot